interviewing Rabbi David Monson at his home, 132 Strathern Road in Toronto. Rabbi, I think let's begin by doing this chronologically. So let's start with Ottawa. Okay. I assume you were born in Ottawa. Okay. But tell me something. First of all, tell me when you were born and something about your family.
April the 6th, 1917.
Okay.
My father came from Poland, Białobrzeg, and my mother came from Keshenet. My mother's family came to Canada in 1906 after the second Keshenet pogrom. Mm-hmm. And to just show how cruel the immigration was, when my grandfather and my grandmother with how many children now? Sarah, Jenny, Laura, Mary, Becky, Jack, and Jack. Oh, Sadie, I forgot. With 7 children, were on their way to Canada, and they stopped in Antwerp to be examined by the Canadian immigration. My grandmother had bad eyes, so they said to my grandfather, "You can't proceed because your wife you could go with your other children, but you have to leave your wife and her newborn child, Sadie, here in Antwerp." So my grandfather said to my grandmother, "Let's go back to Keshenet. What use is it?" So she, in her wisdom, said, "Look, if you're going to be there with the children, and I'm only one with a newborn, it'll be easier for you to bring me than for me to go to Keshenet." So he listened, and he arrived in the port was Halifax, and then the long train ride to Ottawa, and she followed a year later. My father, his family came in 1912, before World War I, and he was so disappointed in Canada because of the lack of Yiddishkeit that he went back to Białobrzeg in 1913, stayed for a while, and came back to Canada. And World War I broke out, and he missed that. Now, my father, in order to get immigration status in Canada, had to go on the farm. So he settled in Estevan, Saskatchewan. And there he farmed, and if you farmed for a certain number of years, you got the farm free, and a couple of cows and horses and so on. He came back to Ottawa on a visit to get married and meet somebody, and he was introduced by Chatwin in those days to my mother, and they got married, but she wouldn't go back to Saskatchewan. So he settled in Ottawa, and she taught him tailoring. She was a dressmaker, and they remained in Ottawa, and I was born April the 6th, 1917.
Now, I don't think I got your parents' first names.
My father's first name was Moshe, and my mother's first name was Charna or Jenny. Her maiden name was Lakovitz.
So
my grandfather was one of the builders. You can see his name in the shul in Ottawa. He was one of the builders of the first Hasidic shul. There was a shul on King Edward Avenue, which was Ashkenaz, Misnagdish.
Right.
And he was a Chassid, so he founded the Murray Street Shul in Ottawa, and which now is in
Alta Vista.
Alta Vista, and a very prosperous shul. And they have the document where he signed the mortgage in Ottawa.
Why did he come to Ottawa to begin with?
Who?
Your grandfather.
Because my grandmother had a sister there. Yeah, my grandmother had a sister there. They called LaFell,
Uh-huh.
the LaFell family. And they moved later to Montreal.
And your father was first in Ottawa, and then he went to Saskatchewan?
No,
Oh, okay.
right
He
to
went directly.
Saskatchewan.
So why did he come back to Ottawa to look for a color?
Because out in Saskatchewan it was impossible to find one.
Well, sure, but why not go to Montreal?
Well,
or
his
Toronto?
parents were in Ottawa.
Oh, his parents were in Ottawa.
How did they get there? Why were they there?
Why were they in Ottawa?
Why Ottawa?
Because of my uncle Hyman.
So your father's brother was there.
Had come
Yes.
first.
Yeah.
Okay. And tell me about your siblings.
My siblings are, there's an 8-year span between me and my next sibling. My father believed in giving Jewish names to the children. And no matter how difficult it would be for the non-Jews to spell it. So he named my brother next to me after his town rabbi in Biologic, the Rebbe Rabbi Yehuda, and he called him Yair.
Yair. Mm-hmm.
And 2 years later, my brother Daniel was born. He gave him the name Daniel. And then 4 years later, my sister Chana was born. And he saddled her with the name Chana. Eventually, people called her Connie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Now, Yair was overseas pretty well at the same time as I was. He was in the Royal Canadian Air Force, and Danny was too young to go, so he graduated from Guelph Agricultural College, and then went to Osgoode Hall Law School, where he became a lawyer. And my sister Connie was of the first graduating class of Carleton University.
Now, your brother Yair, did he ever change his name, or did he ever adopt an English
He had
name?
a lot of trouble with that.
Juair. That's good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Pronounced the way it was.
Always Ewer.
Yeah, spelled the way it was
They call him
pronounced.
Juair, they call
Yeah.
him all kinds of names.
Yeah.
Especially in the Air Force.
Yeah, very good. And the surname, was it always Monson?
No, it wasn't.
What?
Because of, this is what happened. My uncle Hyman came to Canada in the early 1900s. My uncle arrived in Quebec City, way back. He came with there were 3 immigrants. One was Belzenberg, and one was Monheit. The original name was Monheit, and the other was Walensky. So they were going to send my uncle back, send Belzenberg back. Walensky they were letting through. So just then, the Shoichet of Quebec City, Eli Yosef was his name. And he used to meet the immigrants. So he came over to these immigrants and he said, look, they're going to send you back. You don't want to go back. So here's what you do. They came in the so-called illegal. Here's what you do. He says, I'm giving you each $2. The train was near the harbor. There's a train taking off from Montreal. And when you get to Montreal, you'll look around for a Jewish face in the station. And you'll say, Rabbi Hirschcohn.
Was the chief rabbi of
was the
Montreal.
chief rabbi of Montreal. So they were brought to Rabbi Hirschcohn's home. And Hirschcohn said to my uncle, you'll have to change your name. So he figured out Monson instead of Monheit. And to Belzenberg he said, your name will be Belzberg, and you go out west.
Yeah.
And Walensky, you go where you want to go. You went to Winnipeg, Walensky,
Yeah.
the famous
Yeah,
Joseph
yeah,
Walensky.
Joseph Walensky.
Walensky.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah. So that's how, because my uncle settled in Ottawa, he brought the family, the name became Monson.
Now, the Monhites that had a restaurant in Toronto years ago on Bay Street.
Distantly related.
Yeah? Okay. Very interesting. Okay. So we're back in Ottawa. You have been born. I assume that you went to the public school system.
Yes, in those days.
Okay. And tell me about your Jewish education.
Well, in those days, when you were a youngster, from age 5 on, you went to the public school, and then you went to cheder from 4 to 6.
Mm-hmm.
And then as you got older, you went from 6 to 8. Now every night, that 6 to 8 was an umrik. Every night the French Canadians would attack us.
Mm-hmm.
And Moses, he just died, went through cheder with me. Yeah. So my father didn't understand how we allowed those French Canadians who always yelled, "Muzi Juif, ça, Muzi Juif." Why we didn't fight back? Fight back, he used to say. So we organized, and Lou Moses was one of the fighters, and I, and so on, and it stopped. So until the age of 15, I went to cheder and got classes, and interestingly enough, M.Z.R. Frank was the principal of the Ottawa Talmud Torah, and it was Ivrit B'Ivrit, which was most unusual in those days. First we started Ivrit B'Yiddish and then Ivrit B'Ivrit. Now, cheder, most of the kids, even the good ones, dropped out at 13, but most of them stayed till 15. But my father insisted that I have private tuition. So I went to a Rebbe, and then the modern Hebrew, I studied under Mr. Kranzberg was the principal. So I had both, and was kept very busy.
Who was your Rebbe?
My Rebbe was Ellenberg. Yeah.
And
He was a retired shochet in Ottawa. And I studied under Mirsky, the famous Rabbi Jacob Mirsky. Studied under him, and I grabbed whatever Jewish learning I could.
where were you living in Ottawa at that time? In the
77 Friel Street.
Okay.
In the heart of the Semitic district.
Yeah.
And my mother had the nerve one day to go to Father Miro, Monsignor Miro, to complain why he doesn't speak in the churches against Jewish kids being attacked. So he did. Yes, he did.
Wow.
Yeah. My father belonged to the King Street Shul, to the Ashkenaz Shul,
Right.
because he liked modernism, and my grandfather was in the Murray Street
Murray
Shul.
Street. Which were around the corner. I mean, Yom Kippur must have been very close, walking from one place to another.
4 blocks.
Yeah. And what were your plans as a young person? When did you get the bug to be a rabbi?
I got it early in life. Yeah.
So how did your education progress?
Well, when I graduated Lisgar Collegiate, with the Jewish education I had, there was a yeshiva in Montreal, and because of the depression, it was a branch of Rabbi Chanan in New York. So there was a group of us that went to Montreal from Ottawa. I wasn't the only one.
Can you tell some of the other people who went with you?
Isaac Rose, the Rudman boys from Ottawa. Can't remember them all. So I studied under Rabbi Zalmanovich and Rabbi Efraimovitz and Rabbi Dubitsky. And 3 of them gave smicha in those days at the yeshiva.
How long did the course take? I mean, you graduated from high school, so you're, what, 18?
Yes.
Okay. And were you going to university at the same time?
Oh yeah, while I was in Montreal, I was taking courses at university.
At Carleton?
No, Montreal, at McGill.
Oh, at McGill, I'm sorry. McGill, yeah. Mhm.
Excuse me, did you not go to New York, go to yeshiva?
Yeah, they sent me for 1 year to New York, to rabbinical Huns,
Right.
before the smicha. But there was a falling out between the Montreal branch and New York, so my smicha ended up in Montreal,
Okay.
which I have.
From the three Rabbanim in Montreal. Okay. So, did the yeshiva have a name? Was it?
Yeah, the Yeshiva of Canada.
Rabbinical College
Rabbinical
of Canada?
College of Canada.
Yeah.
It's still in existence,
Okay.
I think.
Yeah. Okay. And you got your degree from McGill?
No.
Okay. So what happens? You have your smicha,
Right.
and you're off to earn a living.
Yes.
What happens?
So, during my the first place I went to was North Bay, Ontario. I spent a year there, or a little longer, as teacher and as rabbi, and helped organize their synagogue. And then I got a call from Timmins, which was a very prosperous community. It was the golden days, the gold mining. And I went to Timmins.
What year is this?
I went to Timmins just before World War II.
Okay.
38, I think, yes. And spent time in Timmins. Worked with the Sheikh Linder, Cecil Linder's
Right.
father,
Right.
and they all remember me,
Yeah.
the Linders.
We have a picture of Cousin Linder.
Jonathan Linder.
Yeah, with Van Dyke.
He was a Sheikh
Yeah.
Moyle,
Yeah.
a very capable man.
This
And
is
I used-
before you had your smicha yet? Or is it?
No, I already had
Okay.
it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I used to cover the north, Kirkland Lake and Andersonville.
Jacksonville.
They all knew me up north. I used to come in and speak
Right.
to them, raise money for Israel.
Right. So by this time, Rabbi Rabinowitz from Kirkland Lake had left. Had he?
No, he was still
He was
there.
still there. Okay.
And I arranged. Oh, one of the other students with me at the yeshiva in Montreal was Israel Halpern. I hope he's still alive.
Uh-huh.
A little fellow. Now, I arranged that he should be assistant to Rabbi Rabinowitz because they wanted an English-speaking rabbi. And Rabinowitz is actually the sheikh, and so a very lovely man. And brought my friend Halpern to Kirkland Lake, and there was a shidduch between him and Hindi Rabinowitz.
All right. So, what was Jewish life like in Timmins in that period? I mean, it was a prosperous community.
Very prosperous community.
And the shul was still had been built. They had a former shul.
Built, a beautiful shul.
Yeah, I remember it.
Yeah, you remember
it was demolished to make room for an addition to the bus station,
Really?
which was never built, and there is still a parking lot there.
Oh,
Just
God, what a beautiful shul.
crying. It was a lovely shul.
And Charlie Pierce was the
Yeah.
rabbi.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Pioneer of the
Pioneer
community.
up in Timmins.
Okay, and you remember?
I remember I used to go to with Rabbi Linder. I remember that a Toronto Jew who was working in those days. They had to saw by hand to cut down the trees way up north in Moosonee. I remember that this tree fell on this Toronto Jew and killed him, and we went out and we had to go by sleigh from Moosonee to the lumber camp and bring the body back. And when a person died in Timmins, One of three places the body was sent to by train, naturally. One was Krugersdorf, an old cemetery.
Right. I've been there.
You were there?
I have been there, yes.
And how are the monuments kept?
It's very well kept.
Duke.
Well, Eddie Duke.
Eddie Duke
Eddie
looks
Duke
after
took that. No, actually, it's Bernie Breland who looks after it.
Oh.
And he himself is no youngster, and he's not terribly well. So I don't know where.
Where does he live?
He lives in Kirkwood.
He lives in Kirkwood.
Yeah. And,
So we brought the body back to Timmins, and he was sent to Toronto to his family. One of the experiences.
You were saying there were three alternatives: Krugersdorf, Toronto, what would be the third? Montreal. Okay. Tell me about how the shul operated. I remember there was a mikveh in the shul.
There was a mikveh in
There
the
was a mikveh in the
shul.
shul, which had been.
When I came, I organized a daily minyan, morning and evening, and it was an active congregation, very active.
What about the school?
I used to cover Schumacher, South Porcupine, and the first Jewish doctor up there was Dr. Sammy Jessel, and then there was a lawyer Plattis, and there was a lawyer Herman Moscow.
Right. And then, so who are some of the families that you remember from Timmins in that?
Ravender,
right.
and the Feldmans, all the Feldmans, Alec, Louis, Shia,
right,
and the Finkelmans. I think a Finkelman now is an announcer or something from that family.
Right.
Yeah. And the Halperns. Halpern ran a jewelry store, and the Halperns. I stayed in their home, and the Shankmans. Those are and others.
The Levinsons from South Porcupine.
The Levinsons from South Porcupine.
Yeah. Okay. And so you're still a bocher at this point.
Yeah.
Right. When did you marry?
Well, I got the call to come to Toronto.
Okay.
In '39, just before the war. So I came to Toronto, and I met my wife in '41, February the 6th, '41, and we married October the 21st, '41.
And were you the rabbi when?
Shari Shemayim. It was a basement.
Right. Okay.
I was the rabbi there till I went overseas.
Which was in
1943.
43. Okay. So let's talk about Shari Shemayim. Yeah, I know the experience was not a pleasant one.
No.
But they started to build the building.
Yeah.
Right? And then the war broke out and they couldn't.
Had to stop. Kaufmans were there.
Yeah. That was the first.
The two Kaufmans.
Yeah.
And a wonderful friend of mine there was Greengarden.
Oh, Jack?
Jack's father.
Jack's father.
He ran the Fader there.
Okay. So he used to be in Brantford.
He was in Brantford.
Yeah.
And he came to
run the Fader. Okay.
Good.
So it all fits together. Where did you live when you were the rabbi?
I lived with Jacob Marcus, 223 Northcliffe Boulevard.
Okay. I mean, this was in '43. This was way out in the boonies.
That's right. I remember an incident. We're talking about the hot summer. I even then developed a reputation of helping people. And I remember that it was a hot summer, and a Jewish peddler, who later ended up at the Bakerist with a horse that was ready to die, especially in the hot summer, came all the way from downtown, I think Borden Street, to Northcliffe Boulevard. And it was already in the end of July. And he said to me, Rabbi Monson, je kent het in English. We willen weg nemen mijn veld, we willen hem schießen. Ik dacht hem hebben. Ze geht bald Rosh Hashanah. Northern Yom Kippur, Northern Sukkot. Ik wil ze geven hem veel paar Rosh Hashanah. So what did I do? I got on the wagon with him. I had no car. And we drove down to the city hall where Salzburg was an alderman. And I went into Joe Salzburg. He always liked the way I spoke Yiddish. And I told him the story, and he immediately postponed the taking away of the horse.
It was the city, I assume, that wanted to take the
Take
horse,
the horse
because
away.
because the horse was
Gehaald,
yeah.
Bumstab.
Okay.
Anyway, that same Jew with his wife ended up in the Baycrest. Just when Baycrest was opened, years later. And he got up, I was addressing a meeting of the senior, whom all knew, because I helped the Baycrest on Cecil Street. And so he gets up and he says to the Jews, "Ihr weest was der Rabbi Monson hat getan von mir." And je ratte wird mein Pferd beschissen. All that story.
Beautiful, beautiful. So you have a suburban congregation.
Yes, really suburban in
Okay.
those days.
What was the relationship between Shari Shumayim and the downtown synagogues? I mean, is it a situation where
They were
younger-
disconnected then.
Yeah.
But there was, I had a young a youth league. I organized a youth league. Norman Solomon he's an accountant. He was the president, and some others. And
Was it affiliated with any national organization?
No,
It was
no.
just
just
okay. And tell me about the style of shul that it was. For example, they ended up davening Nusach Ashkenaz.
yeah.
These are all Galicianer. Where do they come to daven
Yeah,
Nusach
they don't
Ashkenaz?
Ashkenaz.
Yeah.
Well, I brought in the Ashkenaz Sidura.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was it did they have a congregational school that early?
No.
Okay.
So
what
Green Garden ran the
he ran the cheder. Okay. What about the neighborhood in that period?
The neighborhood
where
was
the-
English.
Yeah, so there weren't too many Jewish stores on St. Clair.
Oh yeah, there were.
Yeah.
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 Benson had a store.
Yeah.
Yes. And Snowbell had a jewelry store, and the Raskis lived up there. He
Yeah.
was the shochet.
He was a shochet in the old shul, in
And
the
the old
previous
shul on
On
McKay.
Yeah.
Yeah, McKay was older than
Yeah,
Sharsham.
right. And then, what about Tosman? Tosman?
Tosman was
Yeah.
next door to the shul.
Yeah.
And my pulpit was on the side. And I used to write out my sermons in those days. And I remember Meyer Gassner sending up his son Leon. And he stole my sermon. Yeah. But I got up. I said, well, I think I know most of it by heart. And I went on to say it. They did
Why would he
different
do such a thing?
things. That was his joke.
All right. That was supposed to be funny. All right. Okay. All right. What about your predecessor at Shari Shamayim, Rabbi Hurwitz? You remember him at all?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, he used to.
Yeah.
Well, he was brought up there for the odd Shabbos.
Right.
I was very close to him.
Yeah. Yeah. He married my parents.
Did he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because later he went to Beis Yehuda, where
Yes.
our family was.
Yeah.
So let me talk about those early years. The conditions that led you to leave Shari Shamayim. You want to tell me about that?
Well, I had an opportunity. I was already a part-time chaplain, so I decided to become a full-time chaplain.
How does one
Go
become
overseas.
a part-time chaplain? I mean, what did they approach you? Did
They approached me.
Uh-huh.
Canadian Jewish Congress.
Okay. And this was who was that? the head chaplain, Gershon Levy, was
He was
right?
senior chaplain, yeah.
Okay. So when were you appointed part-time chaplain?
1942, 41. I was already a part-time chaplain when I married you. See, when I was a student in Montreal, I used to attend Shabbosim at the Shar Hashamayim, the late Rabbi Herman Abramovich. I became so attached to him that he made a special trip to Toronto to perform our wedding. In those days.
Very nice.
And he had to come by train. I trained both ways.
And he was no youngster then.
He died at 65.
Yeah.
But a very distinguished man.
Right. It was not the first time that he came to Toronto. He used to come many times,
Yeah.
Especially in the early years when we didn't have English-speaking rabbis.
Right.
That's right. What about your relationship with the other rabbis in Toronto? Say, well, Rabbi Gordon was gone by that time.
Rabbi
Grobart.
Samuel Sachs.
Yes.
Grobart was dead too.
Yes.
Very good relationship
Uh-huh.
with Samuel Sachs. He took me on to the Brunswick Talmud Torah. And I became active in the board there.
Mm-hmm.
I always believed in parochial schools, they call them. One of the incidents I remember when we were contemplating opening up the first parochial school in the Brunswick Talmud Torah, Milton Shire's wife was a student. I remember that Eisendrath came and with Ben Sadowski. And Eisendrath said, "Fellow Jews, our people waited 2,000 years for the Gentiles to take us into their schools, and now you're taking us out." In those days, Holy Blossom had its service on Sunday, Sunday morning.
Right. I'm jumping a little bit back and forth, but I hope I'm not
Well,
confusing.
I had a good relationship, especially with there was a Rabbi Berger here.
Yes, yeah.
And Maxwell's father, Philip's father, and you remember how he danced? It was during the Shloshim, but he said a wedding preceded everything. And when his daughter Mildred married a Cap, druggist,
Sure.
he co-officiated with me at the Shari Shemayim. No, it was already Beth Shalom.
Yes.
Beth Shalom. The basement of Beth
Right,
Shalom.
right. The Kapatovskis.
Kapitovsky.
Linitzer.
Linitzer. Oh,
I know.
I used to be their chaplain.
Yeah. Okay. So, what were your duties as part-time chaplain? Let's go
Part-time
back.
chaplain, I used to go out to Camp Borden every single Sunday. The B'nai B'rith arranged a different driver for me. And I'd drive out every single Sunday to Camp Borden. And after the service, I would listen to their problems. The boys had different problems. I used to bring a box of salamis, kosher salamis. Used to bring oranges to them, and some of them are alive, thank God, and remember me. And during the week, I oftentimes went. Brampton had a camp, and Newmarket had a military camp, and I got to know the Francis family and Stone. They lived in Orange, I think it's Aurelia. Aurelia had a camp. So I used to go up to these camps and have a mincha service, a Maariv service, and so on. So I covered a big part of Ontario. Borden on Sunday, and what do you call it, during the week, Aurelia, and so on.
So, B'nai B'rith arranged the drivers, but
Yes.
the chaplaincy was under Congress. So
Under
there was
Congress,
So there
yes.
was still a kind of friendly relationship between the two organizations.
Yes.
Then. Now, when you decided that you wanted to become a full-time chaplain,
Yes.
What is the procedure? How did you go
I
about it?
wrote to Rabbi Abrupt.
Mhm.
He was head of the chaplaincy division. And I told him I'm ready to go overseas. I felt uncomfortable amongst the men going away. Yeah.
Mhm. So tell me about how that happened. How soon after you applied did you go overseas?
Very fast.
Very fast. And where were you assigned to a particular unit? How does it work?
Well, I went overseas. We went by the SS Beaverhill. It was a ship, a freighter. And I was housed with fellow chaplains, Christians. I remember some of their names.
DDD, Doctors, Dentists, and Divinity.
Yeah.
Together.
Yeah.
3D.
Doctors, dentists, divinity. We didn't carry weapons.
Right. And your rank would be captain?
Captain.
Okay. So
Our convoy was attacked. The way they worked it, going overseas, the corvettes and the frigates were on the outside, and all the passengers, so the personnel were on the inside of the ships. And I remember one night we were called to go up on deck in case of emergency. We wore our, they called them then, what's her name, the actress? They called them,
Marlene Dietrich?
no. The lifesaver you wore. They had a name. Anyway, we went up on deck and we saw the flames of the oil ship. They bombed an oil ship. It took us 15 days from Halifax to Greenock, Scotland, I believe, and then by train from Greenock to Aldershot, where the Canadians were headquartered.
So you saw action in Europe itself?
No, I didn't cross the channel.
Okay, so you were in England for
I was in England, before D-Day, I went to see all the boys going over. The Jewish boys had a service with them, and I remember how the ship that was supposed to take them across, the convoy, they had to stay in the ship for an extra day because of the weather. And here they were all cooped up. So, but then the casualties came back from France. There was a Dr. Coleman in Toronto. He lived on Rosemary Road.
Yes.
He was badly shot up. They brought them back from D-Day. You know, Eisenhower had two speeches ready. One, if it succeeds, and one if it fails. And for the first time, they were observing the D-Day calendar. They delivered on the television the one if it failed.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I saw Churchill in person. Heard him speak. And my brother was with the Air Force. He was instrument mechanic.
Mm-hmm.
And one night we were in London. We met for the first time in London, and we were at the Balfour Club, the famous Balfour Club. And what happens? There's a siren, and we have to run down to the the shelter.
Yeah.
And it was a cold stone floor, and I forgot my slippers and I ran all the way back. He thought I was crazy, and I ran back to get it.
Sounds like it.
So I went through the experience of the V1.
Mm-hmm.
The V1 we knew ahead of time where it would land. And then I went through the V2 where we didn't know where it's going to land. And the Germans always sent their planes across, never failed. But they never have so many, never in the history of time and man have so many owed so much to so few.
So you experienced really that,
Yeah.
that kind of thing now. Well, Rabbi, you're back from the war. Can you tell me what were the circumstances surrounding the founding of Beth Shalom Synagogue? Or is there anything else that you did when you came back before the establishment of the synagogue?
Well, I rented a store, corner Chiltern Hill and Eglinton. And we started our first services there. Did you read the speech?
I saw it, but I haven't read it. But I'd like to hear you tell me.
And it was a time when England was keeping Jews out of Israel.
Mm-hmm.
And I delivered a speech on Nila night in the store. And the speech is here. Britain meets out the tyranny.
Yeah, oh yes, of course, I saw that one.
And
Yeah.
then I was attacked in the Yiddish paper. Did you see that?
Mm-hmm.
Schreckliche Unverantwortlichkeit. Why we're living in a British country.
So this is what, 1946?
1946 or 7.
Why did you establish another synagogue when you came back? Were there people?
There was no synagogue between St. Clair
Right.
and North and Town. And what do you call them? The Holy Blossom was the only one.
Right.
So I felt there's a synagogue that the Jewish population is moving up toward Eglinton. So I felt we need a synagogue in Eglinton.
Right.
And then they didn't offer me the position back at Shari Shemayim because it became strictly Orthodox.
Uh-huh.
And I wanted to bring conservatism. Beth Shalom was the first shul in Toronto to have mixed seating.
Right.
Yeah.
What prompted you to take that liberal approach?
Well, I've always believed in mixed seating and so on, and bringing the synagogue up to modernism. And at the beginning, we had opposition, so we had 3 sets of seats, all men, all women, and mixed.
Right.
Until the people acclimatized themselves to
Right.
all being mixed.
Were the mixed in the back or the front?
No, it was on the side.
Oh, it was. Was parallel.
Yeah.
Okay. This was all in the store still.
This was in the store.
Okay.
Nathan Burstein, Oliver Shalom, was the cantor we got for the high holidays. And because he came to the shul, to this minyan, he was expelled from Yeshiva University.
Mm-hmm.
Burstyn.
No, was he? He was a student at Yeshiva University then?
Yeah.
Ah, interesting. And what happened to him?
Well, he went on and became a cantor and had positions in the States as cantor.
Okay. Now, who were some of the Balabatim that you had in that period?
Max Shore was the first president.
Okay.
And Henry Donsky.
Yeah.
And then I had my own family, like on my side and on my wife's side.
So you took it upon yourself to rent the store before you had the support of a congregation.
Yeah.
And people came because they were living in the area?
That's right.
Okay. So how long after
Then we moved into another store.
Yeah.
Barney Markson had a drugstore on Eglinton, just past Westover Hill Road,
Okay.
on the, what do you call it, west side of Westover Hill Road, on the south side of Eglinton.
Uh-huh.
So his store wasn't finished yet either, so we stayed there. This Chilton Hill store was being built by Martin, who had the butcher store down on Brunswick, and who was the partner, and Naftali Quinter.
Ah.
They loaned me the store until they got into the what do you call it business? Until they got into
The grocery business. So the reason that you moved out is because the store was finished and they were ready to start
Yeah.
business. Okay. So then you moved to the Westover Hill store. Now, how soon after you moved into Westover Hill were you ready to begin?
I took my own money and bought the land. Harry Ungerman owned it, and bought the land. There was a gas station on the corner, and I paid down my own money and bought the land. We first applied for a permit on what do you call it? Rose Lawn and Bathurst. There was a big empty lot there. There was a big apartment.
Mm-hmm.
And we were turned down. We had trouble with the Forest Hill. And we were turned down, and we went to court. We hired Cedric the lawyer. I paid for him, and we lost the municipal board. So we had to go to the Township of York.
Is it your feeling that there was anti-Semitism involved?
Yeah. Fred Gardner was the chairman, the mayor
Uh-huh.
of Forest Hill.
Okay. Say no more.
Yeah.
All right. So you now have the land on Eglinton. How do you go about getting an architect? How do you choose?
Wolf Schulman was the original architect, but he didn't go along with the committee's type of synagogue. There is a picture there of the original
Design. Mm-hmm.
And so we went to Jack Sugarman, they were overseas with me. Will Schulman and Jack Sugarman. Jack is alive, I don't know about Wilf.
Okay. And I mean, this is a tremendous undertaking to build this.
Yeah.
How many members did you have in the shul?
200 to start.
200 members or 200 families?
200 families.
Families. So how do you raise money to build such a building?
All kinds of ways. Ads. And approaching. I went from door to door.
Door to door. I heard of a famous meeting where Harry Snyderman
Yeah.
was trying to raise money for the shul.
Yeah.
Okay. Could you remember that meeting?
Yes.
All right. Can you tell me what what you remember from that meeting?
Nothing special. Why?
I remember he said he stood up and said to the assembly, listen, you, whatever he called them, the children of Israel stood at the foot of Mount Sinai, and God said to them, I don't want your gold, I want your children.
Yeah.
He says, but I'm standing here and I'm telling you, I don't want your children, I want your blank, blank gold. and was successful in raising some money, yeah. Yeah. In places like Shari Shemayim or other shuls, they build a basement first, and then they run out of money, and then they wait till they have more. That was the same.
Built a basement for a long time.
Yeah.
And then the corner after the school came, Harry Arnoff. And we built the basement.
Right.
And then Lou Kadeski, I convinced him to bring from Israel at great expense the Ten Commandments that are on the corner. Have a piece of Israel
Right.
in the synagogue.
Yeah.
And he went for it. I think it cost him about $10,000
Wow.
in those days.
Mm-hmm. So, when the shul was completed, now the shul was completed, what, 1949, something like that? Yeah.
50.
Yeah. And so, how many families was there a dramatic increase in the
Population
Yeah.
in this area.
and in the membership of the shul as well? So, say when the shul opened, how many families would you say?
800.
800. So that was really demonstrated the need as well as the as a change in the area. Okay. Did you find any opposition to the mixed seating issue or the microphones within the membership?
No.
And the school
Yes.
continued to operate from the beginning?
From the beginning. The school operated from the beginning.
You mean even before the building was completed? Okay. Was it seen as strictly a congregational school, or was it, Associated used to have like branches
It became a branch of the association.
of the Associated?
But it was afternoon school. I wanted a day school. I couldn't
Yeah,
get it.
yeah. In those years, it was community wasn't ready.
No.
Yeah. Where did the teachers come from?
Oh, Mr. Rappaport.
Who taught at the?
Mrs. Rappaport.
Yeah.
Oh, the teachers came from Brown, Alexander Brown. Associated Brunswick supplied the teachers.
Yeah. So people who taught maybe in the day school, even though there wasn't a day school until the early 40s.
Day school in 42.
Yes. Kindergarten.
Yeah.
Miss Tabak.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about other Clay Kodesh in the shul?
Oh, it started with Rabbi Kirschenblatt from the very beginning. He was a teacher,
Mm-hmm.
and he was also what do you call it?
Balkari?
Balkari and Baltzvila.
Uh-huh.
For Yontif, we brought in a cantor.
Yeah. Who did you bring, for example?
First we had, what's his name? Perla.
Yeah.
What's his first name?
He's in one of the pictures.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we had Wint. He was the chazan for the Verband.
Wantroff.
Weintraub.
Yeah. When did you first get a permanent chazan?
First permanent chazan was Oppenheim.
Mm-hmm.
Mordechai Oppenheim.
Yeah, that's a name I remember only by,
Yeah.
What was the relationship between yourself and the chazanim?
I had strained relations with. No, Oppenheim I got along with. But I think the chazan Warman I had strained relations. But after that, everything went smooth.
Right. Can you tell me what the source of the tension was?
Well, the people wanted to get through at 12.
Yeah.
And Chazan Warman, wonderful Chazan,
Yeah.
he didn't let him out till about 1:45.
Yeah. Okay, so it was artistic differences. So here is a new neighborhood in the late 40s, early 50s.
And then the windows I started to sell.
Yeah.
And I had a marvelous artist, a non-Jew. My suggestions, he got those windows.
Put into effect. The
No shoe has windows like that.
beautiful show, beautiful windows, and I guess they look like McCausland windows.
The cost.
Yeah. They have a particular style, McCausland.
Yeah.
Okay. Tell me something about this new neighborhood. What percentage of the population would you say were Jewish within the sort of catch basin of the shul?
The neighborhood was growing by leaps and bounds. It went as far as Briar Hill, and then it started to go as far as Briar Hill, which was quite far.
And was there public transportation along Eglinton?
Yeah, bus.
Yeah, it wasn't TTC, was it? It was,
TDC only went to Oakwood.
yeah.
That's what drove me one day to start the Northwestern Hospital. Well, the streetcar used to come up Oakwood and turn left on Eglinton.
Right, turn west on Eglinton.
Yeah.
Right.
And one day, a little Christian boy was crossing the street, and he was hit by the streetcar. And an ambulance came, and the closest hospital was Toronto Western. He died in the ambulance. So a Protestant minister came to me by the name of Canon Jackson, A.J. Jackson, and Father Gallagher. And they said we should start a hospital in this area. So here I wasn't didn't finish the shul yet, and I was a Likudnik.
If we can go back to the hospital and talk about...
I got the Italian community.
This is 1954, just to get it on the tape. So tell me about the Italian community.
I got them, there were Italians in that area, Keel Street. So I got Johnny DiToro, Ralph Cowan on the Star, Johnny DiToro, and Dr. Philp. I got the doctors on Oakwood and so on. Not I, we. And we got this Board of Governors together. And then it was the first hospital where Jewish doctors had an open door. In those days, Jewish doctors, there was only Dr. Track, Dr. Appel,
Right.
At
the General.
The General.
And Dr. Walensky at the Western.
And Dr. Walensky at the Western, and that's all.
Yeah.
And then Northwestern opened its doors to Jewish doctors. They had an open door through me. Dr. Kingstone came in. He was overseas with me. Dr. George Drutz came in. So the hospital grew and grew. I don't know why the NDP government changed it.
Yeah.
It's closed.
Yeah, it's terrible. It's terrible. Anything else you want to say about the hospital?
Well, it was a hospital, with an open door, and never turned any patient away.
Did the hospital have a chaplaincy service?
Yes.
Yeah. And were you the Jewish chaplain in the hospital?
I was a Jewish chaplain, and Canon Jackson was the Protestant chaplain. And Father Gallagher, who died after, was followed by Father Bartholomew. That's the third chaplain.
Okay. Tell me about your association with the Wingate branch, or with any other veterans organization that there might have been, a Jewish veterans organization.
Well, it was just a Wingate
Yeah.
branch, which was founded D. Lou Harris was still alive and a member of it, and his brother-in-law, who had lost a leg in World War I. By the way, D. Lou Harris got me interested in Israel bonds. Das Shalom was the first synagogue in Toronto to sell Israel bonds on Yom Kippur night, called Nidri night, and call out the names. And it took hours during Kol Nidri. Every name was called out.
How early was that introduced?
1953.
Um,
Today they sell bonds, but they don't call it.
they don't call the names, no. Were you, at the time of the War of Independence, Lou Harris was very much involved in the gun running issue.
We stored the things at 159 Bay Street. It was a garage.
Uh-huh.
And then the guns were taken across the border at night, put on a ship in New York, sent across.
Well, that's an address that I haven't heard before. I mean, I always hear about the Levy's building on Weston Road, you know.
Levy's building too.
Yeah. But this is 159 Bay Street, which would have been...
It was a garage, an
Yeah.
indoor garage. It's knocked down now.
Yeah. So where was it located?
Under the steps going up. So there was 159 Bay Street was near the Royal York.
Near the Royal York. That far south?
Yeah,
Interesting.
near the port.
Yeah. Yeah. Fascinating. Okay. Who else was involved in this business?
There was Leo Harris, there was Sandal Zacks, there was Mark Levy.
And any visits from the RCMP? Rumor had it that they knew precisely what was going on and turned a blind eye. Would you agree?
That's true.
Yeah. Okay. And how long did that program go on?
Until Israel became a state.
So that, I mean, in 48. So there wasn't any more gun running, even in the war for independence?
Oh yes.
There was, yeah. Okay.
Truman was the president of the USA.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. History will record how good a friend he was, unlike many others.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell me about your involvement, first of all, with the war veterans. What kind of state were they in after the war? I know this was like the successor to the British Empire Service League, as it used to be called. Okay.
Well, there was quite a number of Jewish war veterans. There were World War I veterans and World War II.
Mm-hmm.
It was a very thriving organization.
So who were some of the people that you remember from that period, from that organization?
Sam Romberg.
Yeah, who's still active.
Yeah.
There was the gentleman that appears in a great many of the pictures. He had one leg.
It was Lou Harris's brother-in-law.
His name? You remember? I'll get it. Okay. There's another Harris, like Dr. Bill Harris, William Harris.
He lost his son.
He lost a son at Normandy. Was he active at all in the...
No.
He wasn't. Did you find that the War Veterans Organization divided in some way? Would you say the descendants of the East Europeans were more active than those that came out of the Holy Blossom Circle?
Well, Singer was a member. He was Holy Blossom.
Which singer? Fred? Vernon
He
Singer.
was overseas.
Okay. Huh, I picture him as a very young man, you know. But yeah, okay, good. That's good to know. I know that you're a long-standing conservative.
Yeah.
Tell me how your involvement in politics came about.
Well, John Diefenbaker was a lawyer in Prince Albert. Mm-hmm. And my father was admitted to Canada as a farmer in the farms not far from Prince Albert. And he had some legal work done. By then, in those years, by John Diefenbaker, before World War I. And kept up a relationship with him. And when John Diefenbaker was elected an MP to Ottawa, he looked up my parents. And from then on, we became friends. Now, it was through John Diefenbaker when he became Prime Minister that I got the Moroccan Jews to be admitted to Canada. What's his name? His sons run a big dress. I drove all night from Toronto to Ottawa because these two Moroccan Jews came in illegally. And he told John Diefenbaker the story. And he sent for, she was Minister of Immigration.
Yeah, I know who you mean.
Yeah.
Like
Fairclough.
Yeah, Ellen Fairclough.
Ellen Fairclough. And he said to her, as many permits as Rabbi Monson was for the Moroccan Jews, we would get them admitted. That was a start.
Okay.
The Moroccan Jews came in.
Did you work actively for the party?
Yeah.
When
I worked for John Diefenbaker
yeah.
Party.
In your particular area?
Yeah.
Yeah. And after the Diefenbaker era, did you continue
I
your...
still took an interest
You took
in the PCs.
Tell me about your work with the Canada Council.
Oh yes, I was appointed to Canada Council, and the only other Jews on it were Sam Steinberg of Montreal and Sam Bronfman. And there was a Rabbi Klein in Toronto, and he wanted a grant for his book.
Dictionary for
Dictionary,
his...
yeah. Biblical dictionary.
It was an etymological dictionary.
That's right.
Yeah.
And he couldn't get it. So I spoke to Marcel Faribault, who represented Quebec. He was a rare French-Canadian PC. And we moved a motion that he should get the grant, which he got. And I remember Sam Bronfman outside the meeting telling me, you shouldn't show yourself so much pro-Jewish. I said thank you to him. It was very cordial. And the grant went through. And every time a grant came up, an application, he had an application and I helped him. That is, what's his name? Elliot Maris's son.
Yes.
Elliot was overseas his name.
Mm-hmm.
I got him a grant.
Yeah, Michael.
Michael.
Yeah. Okay. I have a few questions here, and I hope it won't embarrass you because these are questions having to do with your chesed. Okay, so there's a story about how you once came home from shul without your shoes. Want to tell me that story?
Yeah. It wasn't from shul. It was from the Y.
Oh, it's the Y. Okay.
A fellow came in with to the Y. I used to swim at Bloor and
Spadina.
Spadina. And he came in and his shoes were tattered, so I figured I could make it with stocking feet, and I had more shoes at home. So I gave him my shoes, and I drove home, and I sat in the car for about 15 minutes waiting for her to go away. She would be wondering why I'm coming out of the car without shoes.
Uh-huh.
Well, that's the story.
That's very, very nice. Can you give me an idea what what year this might have been?
Oh, yeah.
That I can't tell you.
No? But you were already living here.
Yeah, I was living here.
You're living here. Okay.
Oh,
All right. And a story about how you went to Israel and came back with an empty suitcase.
Oh yes, I used to go with a full suitcase and find families there that needed clothes, and I always came back with an empty one, knowing
So-
I had more clothes at home.
So these were your own clothes that you were
Yeah.
giving away. Any story that comes to mind about people who were in jail that you might have gotten out?
Yes, paid their bail,
Yeah.
and many a time appeared before the magistrate or judge. In those days they called it magistrate,
Mm-hmm.
and pleaded and took responsibility for the person's, what should I say, behavior
Mm-hmm.
and so on.
Are these people who you knew personally, or just because?
Some personally,
Mhm.
some, they called me.
Ah. So people knew to call you.
Yeah.
The kind of reputation you have in the city. Okay. An incident in which there was somebody who was about to commit suicide.
He was a musician. He called.
yes.
He was going to commit suicide. So I ran in the middle of the night, convinced him to remain. But later on he got into that car of his and he drove on the highway and hit a truck.
Yes.
I know you're a Kohen. That presents difficulties for a rabbi, doesn't it? Can you tell me how being a Kohen had affected, your congregational rabbi? You've got to go in the cemetery.
No, I emulated Rabbi Armand Cohen of Cleveland.
Yeah.
They found a heter. So,
Our friend, Mr. Forrest from the United Church,
oh yes,
you were very vocal
against
against him. What do you recall about that period?
it was that period where Israel was fighting the British. Forrest, of course, was very anti-Israel.
So Forrest went back that far? Like before the establishment of the state?
That I can't recall.
I didn't realize that. A story of your driving along Wilmington Avenue, and there's a lady walking with groceries.
Yeah.
Okay.
I picked her up.
Yeah.
And, she was one of the families that I helped when I first came to Toronto. And she looked at me and said, "Who are you?" After she put her parcels in. I said, "I'm Rabbi Monson." She says, "Oei, wees mir, findest du das mir? Was wilt van mij?" And she says, "Je bent allemaal als wie heuig, als een shame." Je bent angetonnen aan mijn dier. Cook was out from well, I couldn't be fast enough to get her to her destination.
That's funny. That is really funny. When would you say this was?
It was after the war.
It was after the war.
Yeah.
Speaking of the war,
Yeah.
could you tell me about how people came to you asking for leave, asking for passes? The reputation or the stories that have come down is, oh yeah, Rabbi Monson would give me a pass, but it cost me money. Let me hear your side of it.
That's not true.
Yes.
If the person was on personal wealth, I would
Right.
direct them to give charity somewhere.
Okay.
I never took anything for myself.
All right. Good. I wanted to get that clear.
Yeah.
Let's go back to the 1950s. I guess it must have been the mid-1950s when Sephardic Jews are coming from Morocco.
Oh, yes. Yes. Mrs. Monson and I were visiting St. Catherine's brother lived.
Yeah.
And we were staying there, I think, a couple of days. And Ellie Mimram and Albert Needham came into this country illegally. The prime minister at that time was Diefenbaker. And they told me they're here illegally. So I took Mrs. Monson back to Toronto. And my brother drove them to my, I lived at Mrs. Monson's, what year was it? I think I lived here. And I put him in my car and drove all night to Ottawa. And took him then to see Mr. Diefenbaker. And Mr. Diefenbaker said, we won't let that happen. And he pushed a button and asked for Ellen Fairclough, was the Minister of Immigration. And he ordered her to issue permits for these two illegal immigrants. Now, one of them died, but Ellie Mimram is still alive. And his son is a multimillionaire, Joe Mimram, from clothes, ladies' clothes, Monaco, I think. Anyway, after that, the Moroccan Jews started to come in mass.
Are you suggesting that this particular incident encouraged them to come? Did they know that this?
They wanted to come.
Right. And what was the obstacle? Like, was it they didn't feel that
They couldn't get in.
they couldn't get in, so that the government let up on its restrictions
Right.
as a result of this? Oh, so did Mr. Diefenbaker exercise his influence
Yes.
after this?
Yes.
After this, and what was your role in that beyond, after the incident of these two people? What was your role in?
Help them with their problems.
Yeah. Did you speak to the Prime Minister on this subject after
Yes.
this incident? Okay. On a regular basis?
Regular basis.
Okay.
And I officiated, I was one of the officiants at his funeral.
I know the family connection goes back
Goes
goes back a long time. Yeah. Okay. Rabbi Dr. David Monson. So your honorary doctorate is from University of Waterloo.
Right.
Can you tell me the circumstances? First of all, when did you get the doctorate?
1964.
Yes.
Uh-huh. And what was the? I mean, they don't give it to everybody.
Well, this is Dr. Jerry Hayden. Was establishing the University of Waterloo, and he had a lot of opposition because there was
the Lutheran University there.
they didn't want him there, and he had a good deal of trouble raising funds, including governmental funds. I don't know who the Premier of Ontario was at the time. And
Was it still Leslie Frost?
no,
What year are we talking about that he's trying to establish the university?
well, a couple of years before 60.
So in maybe the late 50s, early
Yeah.
60s? Okay.
And I interceded and helped him get the funding,
With the provincial government?
provincial government.
Okay. I assume it was a conservative government,
Yeah.
right? Would you say, I mean, how were you able to exercise your influence? Was it because it was a conservative government?
That's right.
Yeah, so, all right. So you had worked for the conservative.
Just got a letter today from the University of Waterloo.
Yeah? Good.
Oh, and my honorary graduate was George Drew. Just two of us were given the doctorate.